Hey folks, walk with me. Well, we're out for another pre-sunrise walk this morning. These are challenging to do, but really nice to be able to do. I woke up this morning and thought about making, another current events or political or constitutional or societal video, and I thought, you know what? I'm really working hard to convince myself to do this, and it doesn't feel like it's the thing I want to say at the moment. And that's the whole point of this playlist, right? So here's what I actually want to say. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and I was describing an interaction that I had, and I had said, I was sort of describing a period of time, and I said, we were having a hard time getting along, but we periodically had some decent moments. And he sat with that for a minute, and he said, from what you're describing, it sounds like you could just as easily say that you had a pretty good time together, and along the way you had a few dust-ups. And that sounds like that would pretty much be true as well. And I thought, you know what? That is true. And it sort of set me thinking on probably not just my tendency, but probably many people's tendency to really outsize the perceived negative and really downsize the perceived positive. And so I had set my time that I was describing with these people. I had couched my time in a generalized sense of it being hard or challenging, and then said that there were brief moments where it was less challenging or maybe even a little bit good. But yeah, reflecting on it, I think it would be very fair to say that my time that I was talking about was generally pretty good, and along the way there were a few dust-ups. And couching the experience in the air quotes positive, and therefore sort of diminishing the negative. And obviously we do this for very primitive survivalist reasons, right? It's in our more primitive days, we had to pay the most attention to whatever was the most dangerous, whatever seemed the most likely to have a negative impact in the future or currently. It was a real threat, like an actual literal life threat. And so if we ignore those things, we die. And today, carrying that through to modern society, I'm not going to say that is never the case. Obviously, people still are born and people still die, but it's not the case in the same way. We largely now layer this mindset, this primitive perception or way of thinking, on top of a world where most of these things are relatively elective, meaning they don't have great long-lasting importance, dire consequences, and they loom largest in our minds, but they don't hold an actual danger in the sense of, if I don't remember that snake is poisonous, and keep that really at the forefront of my mind, even though I only see that snake once every 5 years. If I don't remember that it's poisonous, I will die next time I see it. It's there's few things in modern life, if we're lucky. See, I'm doing it there as well, right? If we're lucky, meaning most of the time we are in this mortal danger, and if you're lucky, you're not. That's not true. Most of the time, and most people are not in this mortal danger. And for an unfortunate few in the world, and by few it could be millions, right? Or even tens of millions. But for an unfortunate few, it is currently the case that for some reason they may be in mortal danger. Most of the time, or much of the time. But the news cycle does this to us as well, right? The idea that we have access to not just like the 6 o'clock news, like back in the day, the evening news, but now it's all information, truthful or not. We have access to it all the time. And the problem with the news cycle is that things are newsworthy because they are uncommon. It took me a long time to realize this. But things are newsworthy because they're uncommon. And so when you see things on the news and they scare you out of your pants, just realize that the thing that you're really outsizing there, the thing that you're really focusing on as a big looms large thing, is a very unlikely thing. That's why it's newsworthy. Doesn't mean that it can't pose a challenge or an issue or a danger or whatever. But to see a crime on the news and then spend the next year walking around terrified of that crime is relatively backwards world, right? It is assuming that the rare thing is the common thing, and that the dangerous thing, the ever-present dangerous thing, is truly ever-present. And so I know I've sort of wound myself through a few different examples or areas in which this can touch at the moment, but again, to go back to the source here, I do think that it is important to realize when you are couching your overall world, your overall view of things in a space of negative with little glimpses of positive. And to at least ask yourself, could I flip this? Could I flip it and reverse it? And say, oh no, I'm going to couch this in the positive, and just note that there are a few glimmers of negative or challenge or whatever. And in a modern day, in a news cycle where people, I think, feel very overwhelmed, overrun, and that they are stretched to their limits in various ways, maybe this reframing could help. Could help. I don't have to add to that. Just could help. So maybe a little something to consider there. I feel like these pre-sunrise videos, rare as they are also extra rambly. So hopefully that was at least comprehensible, or able to be comprehended, even though it may have been a bit rambly. All right, folks. Well, if you walked with me or watched along this far, I certainly appreciate it. And as always, I will see you in the next video.